I was promoting one of the Tekken movies 4 years ago, right? This journalist suddenly said, "Hey, what do you think of Steven Seagal saying you don't know how to punch?" I thought, Steven Seagal, action star, martial arts expert, and Hollywood's most famous troublemaker. Seagal was a 9S icon with hits like Under Siege and The Glimmerman. But behind the scenes, his reputation is anything but heroic. He's become known as one of the most hated people in Tinseltown because of his strange behavior, nightmares that start at night, shocking accusations, and legendary fights. In this video, we go into great detail about the celebrities who can't stand Steven Seagal, the shocking reasons they avoid him, the famous events that made people angry, and the unbelievable story of what happened after he crossed a famous stunt coordinator. To find out, keep watching. Charlize Theron. Charlize Theron may look like a supermodel, but she fights like a warrior on and off screen. So when Howard Stern asked her about Steven Seagal in 2020, she didn't think twice. After seeing those famous clips of Seagal awkwardly pushing stunt performers, she laughed and said, "He's so fat and just pushing people. He can hardly fight. It's stupid." But the real blow came when she talked about the many women who said Seagal had done something wrong. "He isn't very nice to women," she said, her voice sharp. "So I don't mind talking bad about him." Then she said the knockout line right into the microphone. "So F you." It was one of the few times an A-list star publicly destroyed Seagal without being scared. Liam Neeson's shot at Seagal was quieter, but it did a lot more damage. People on Jimmy Kimmel Live asked the star of Taken if he had ever worked with Seagal. Neeson didn't even flinch. Who gave him the color in his hair? Stevie Wonder. The crowd went wild, but there was real anger behind the joke. A journalist once caught him off guard by asking, "What do you think of Steven Seagal saying you don't know how to punch?" Neeson, who used to be a boxer, was shocked. "I know how to punch," he said, and his eyes narrowed as he told the story. Then Kimmel made fun of Seagal's time in Russia, which hurt even more. "I don't know if he moved there or if we sent him there and told him not to come back." It was the kind of segment where every punchline hit harder than the last, John Leguizamo. But John Leguizamo took the hardest hit from Seagal, literally. Seagal walked in on the first day of executive decision rehearsals and said, "I'm in charge. What I say goes." Leguizamo laughed out loud. But Seagal didn't. He hit Leguizamo with the Aikido elbow that knocked the wind out of him and slammed him against a brick wall. All Leguizamo could say while lying on the floor was why. Years later, he made fun of the embarrassment. Gold played Seagal in his Broadway show Ghetto Clown, where he acted out Seagal's flailing arms and strange way of running. Seagal allegedly threatened to punch Leguizamo on the red carpet after hearing about the joke. Leguizamo's answer was as funny as his comedy. "I don't think he gets invited to many red carpets." Then he gave the last blow. How do you go from being a working-class martial arts teacher to a diva with a big ego? Juliana Margulies. Juliana Margulies will always remember the first and only time she met Steven Seagal. An experience that was so scary that it changed how she got around Hollywood. She agreed to meet Seagal in his hotel room early in her career while auditioning for Out for Justice. She thought this was normal at the time. As soon as she sat down, she felt something hard under the cushion. Seagal reached under the bed, pulled out a gun, and put it on the nightstand like it was nothing. Then he leaned in and said he wanted to read her palm because he was a healer. Margulies' instincts kicked in when a loaded gun was only a few inches away and things were getting stranger by the second. She ran out of the room, shaking and out of breath. Years later, she said that this scary experience ended up keeping her safe. She said no when Harvey Weinstein asked for a private meeting like that. She had already survived the same situation that had drawn so many young actresses to it, and she wasn't going to risk it again. Portia Daci's experience went in the same disturbing direction. At the beginning of her career, she went to what she thought was a real final audition with Seagal. Instead, he sat her down, talked about chemistry off-screen, and then without thinking, he unzipped his leather pants. Daci was horrified and ran out of the room right away. But things got worse when she called her agent. Instead of being angry, she got a cold, sarcastic comment. "I didn't know if he was your type, though." That moment revealed a darker truth. This wasn't just how Seagal acted. The system around him made it possible. Years later, when their Me Too movement was at its peak, Daci spoke out in public. And Ellen DeGeneres gave her more attention by saying, "I'm proud of my wife, Ronda Rousey." The fight between Ronda Rousey and Seagal goes back to the history of martial arts and humiliation. Gene LeBell, her uncle and a famous actor, once choked Seagal so hard on set that the action star supposedly lost control of his bowels. It was one of the most talked about stories in Hollywood. Rousey always remembered it. When asked, she said that her uncle could still beat Steven Seagal even when he was old. And she gave her own challenge with a scary amount of confidence. If Seagal ever insulted LeBell in front of her, she would have to make him poop his pants again. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning from someone who could fully back it up. Rae-Dawn Chong's story added another disturbing layer to the claims against Steven Seagal. She said that in the 1980s, her agency sent her to a meeting at the Bear Hotel late at night. But when she got there, she was told Seagal was waiting in his room. She knew right away that it was a trap. She wouldn't go inside. So she stood at the door while Seagal came in wearing a robe, walked across the room, and sat down with his legs spread so wide that she could see everything before he casually covered himself. When he asked if her blouse was silk, and if he could touch it, she said, "You know what silk feels like," and then she left. Chong later said very clearly, "I never let him touch me, and I would have killed him." Jean-Claude Van Damme. For decades, Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme have been fighting over insults and bravado. On the Arsenio Hall show, Seagal made fun of Van Damme's fighting skills. Later, when asked if Van Damme could beat him in a real fight, he said, "Can I laugh in your face?" He said on his own reality show that a fight would be like stepping on an ant. But Sylvester Stallone says that the truth was very different. Van Damme finally lost it at a party in 1997 after years of Seagal's insults and told him to fight in Stallone's backyard. The Seagal ran away. Later, Van Damme saw him again at a nightclub. Seagal disappeared again. Stallone said Van Damme was too strong. Seagal didn't want any of it. The SNL cast. Steven Seagal's 1991 appearance on Saturday Night Live is still remembered as one of the worst hosting performances in the show's history. People who worked with him said he was humorless, defensive, and hard to get along with. Tim Meadows remembered Seagal always complaining about jokes he didn't get. Julia Sweeney said that his behavior was legendary crazy, especially when he locked himself in his dressing room because the sketch said that Hans and Fur could beat him up. David Spade put in simple terms. He didn't want to go along. Lorne Michaels even made fun of him in public. Nicolas Cage joked that people might think he was the biggest jerk to ever be on the show. Michaels said no, that would be Steven Seagal. DMX's time with Steven Seagal was not at all like the respectful partnership Seagal said it was. Seagal publicly called DMX a gentleman who was kind, thoughtful, and reflective, but the rapper remembered something else. DMX made fun of Seagal's speech by saying he was a head with spray-on hair. He and his wife would make fun of Seagal behind his back, and DMX finally called him an a-hole. Hollywood practicality won out, even though there was a lot of anger. Years later, they got back together for Beyond the Law, showing that money can make even the worst grudges go away. Jenny McCarthy. Jenny McCarthy's audition for Under Siege 2 was a nightmare that she still talks about decades later. She says Seagal ruined the audition by asking her personal questions and then telling her to stand up and take off her dress because there was nudity. When she said no, she said there was no nudity in the script. He kept pushing her until she cried and ran out, yelling, "You idiot, rent my Playboy video." She says Seagal grabbed her as she got to her car and told her not to tell anyone. McCarthy hasn't changed his mind in years. I'd still tell him, "You're a fodding, and I hope you change your ways," if I saw him today. George Foreman. Even the famous heavyweight boxer George Foreman got involved in the Seagal drama once. In 2017, when Foreman was 69 years old, he publicly challenged Seagal to a 10-round fight in Las Vegas. He said Seagal could use any style he wanted and confidently predicted that he would knock him out in 1 or 2 rounds. Talks with Seagal's manager were supposed to start, but Seagal never replied. Spending time with Vladimir Putin in Russia. The match never happened, but Foreman never changed his mind about what would happen. He was sure that Seagal wouldn't last long if the fight happened. Rachel Grant. Rachel Grant, who is best known for her role in Die Another Day, made one of the most shocking claims against Steven Seagal. She said in 2018 that she was flown to Bulgaria to rehearse with him for an audition for Out for a Kill in 2002, but things took a turn for the worse. Grant said that Seagal kept telling her to take off her top, and when she didn't, he did it himself. She said, "My breasts were completely exposed." Then he pushed her onto a bed and started to unzip his pants. He stopped because of her tears and quickly said he was sorry. She was shaken and embarrassed, and later asked what actress should be brought to someone's bedroom on the first meeting and told to take off her top. Someone else ended up getting the part. Seagal's lawyer said he didn't have any contact with Grant and flatly denied the claim. Norris Chuck. There was always tension between Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal, but they never openly fought. Norris knew exactly what kind of reputation Seagal had in the martial arts world because he was Bob Wall's former teacher and was well aware of Wall's long-running feud with Seagal. Dick Cavett asked Norris in 1993 how good Seagal really was, and Norris was careful with his answer. He said he couldn't tell because Seagal's movies used tight shots and quick cuts that hid everything. Norris immediately asked, "Was it Steven Seagal?" when Cavett told a story about a martial artist who was rude to him in a bookstore. The audience laughed, but Cavett kept going, asking if Seagal's scary, rude personality was just an act. Norris didn't think twice. He shook his head and said, "It goes on in his whole life." Unfortunately, And when Cavett jokingly asked if Seagal had ever stepped on his foot, Norris gave the coldest answer of all. No, he wouldn't dare. And that's just one of many problems, grudges, and even fights that have followed Steven Seagal throughout his career. What do you think? Is Seagal a misunderstood martial arts star? Or has he earned the bad blood from so many people in Hollywood and beyond? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this in-depth look at celebrities who really hate Steven Seagal, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video about the most shocking Hollywood rivalries of all time.